kind of the plan through until the weather gets really nice and warm. We're going to have Dirty Business, a film on clean coal. We're also going to have in 2 months Colony. It's about bees and the colony collapse disorder. And we're going to have a guest group from one of the local beekeepers that'll come, and I've already chatted with them, and there's a lot of controversy on this, so there could be some fireworks with that. We're also going to participate in the Rouge Rescue Day, for those that are interested. We're trying to get a tour of the Detroit sewage plant for the fall. They normally let only technical people into that. We're not very technical. We're going to try to get in. If not, we'll have something else that'll be kind of an interesting tour for our first activity in the fall.
Okay. Well, my name is Ann Honhart, and this is Steve Olson, and we have some other Green Ministry folks here if you'd like to raise your hands. There we go. There's Kyoko over there, and Nancy, and their sister Jean, and let's see, that's Beth Dana. We started a Green Ministry at our church and John Maloney, of course, to interest the rest of our congregation in being more energy efficient and reduce ideas such as recycling, which we've been doing a little bit. And now we're doing it in greater strides. So welcome, and we try to encourage other churches and organizations such as Sierra Club, Audubon, Mission, whatever, to come and join us for our free films once a month, because Steve has pointed out, plus we have field trips. And we also have things around Christmas time where we make homemade Christmas gifts, and you're welcome to come. We're not proselytizing and expecting you to join our church, but if you'd like to, that's great too. But at any rate, we just want to spread the word that there are environmental issues out there that we all need to be concerned about, because this is God's creation. So, well, also I'd like to introduce a special guest besides our guest speaker, who's special tonight, and that's Julie Lyons-Bricker. And Julie, would you please stand? She's the director of Michigan Interfaith Power and Light. And Michigan Interfaith Power and Light is how we really got started about 4 or 5 years ago. And it was with their founder, Reverend Morse, and also Patty Gillis, who introduced us through some book called The Cry of Creation, and we had a 4-week course. And after that, we just took off flying. We had field trips to green facilities, etc. And then we started showing green films and doing fun things like going to sewage plants. So at any rate, if anyone is interested in talking to Julie later, if you have a church or organization, you might want to tie in with Julie, because they offer a lot of perks, like free assessments of your facility. You'll get an energy assessor in, and they also have discounts for ABC Warehouse and other things such as that. And also the electric company in Ferndale, and you can get discounts on bulbs. And we have the free bulbs tonight by virtue of Patty Gillis, so good thing for that. So Julie has a display in the back, and she'd be glad to give you a membership form. So hopefully you'll have a chance to talk to her. Very important person. You'll see her at most green places at Earth Day. And I'd also like to follow up. Last month we showed a film called Addicted to Plastics, and that seemed to be very popular. We doubled our attendance, so I guess people are really interested in plastics. And we were talking about recycling, and I did bring, as a follow-up, SACRA pamphlets. And SACRA is Southeastern Michigan Recycling Center, which is across next to Myers, across from Myers and Coolidge. And some of you may belong to that recycling center area. But at any rate, if you do and you want to know what to recycle, please pick up a pamphlet. What they don't recycle at SACRA are hard plastic caps. So all of you have been, with great dedication, screwing the caps, throwing the caps away, and then you have peanut butter jars, mayonnaise, ketchup, whatever, fruit juice, and just recycling the bottle or the container and throwing away the cap. You now have a place to deposit hard caps, and that's Aveda. Aveda is a cosmetic store. And there's a whole list of them. Somerset has them, Royal Oak has them, etc. They take hard plastic caps and they recycle them into shampoo bottles, conditioner bottles, makeup, whatever. So it's very nice of them, and they're willing to take caps from people who just walk into the salon on Center Street, Royal Oak, or they'll take bags of them if you take them to Somerset North or South. And you bring them here to our church, because we're going to start a little collection. So if you come next month with your hard caps, there'll be a container back by that fire extinguisher. So
You get free admission if you bring caps.
Oh,
it's free.
you get 5, you get punch. Okay. Thank you very much.
Okay, and as always, as is in our tradition, we're kind of we're going to skip a couple of the chapters in the film. We'll keep it down to about 60 minutes, 62 minutes. Allow us for some discussion afterward. We've got a guest who's going to be helping guide the discussion, Lee Duffy. She's going to help come up here and do that. We're also going to do something different with some recording of the discussion. And we'll kind of remind you and announce that when we move into that stage, and people will be able to opt out if they don't want to be shown, and I'll do a reminder of that at that time. So anyway, we'll get started with the film. It is a horror film. If you hadn't been told, hadn't been reminded, it is a little scary, and we'll get it started now. Help facilitate discussion and present some items. Carl Weiler is also here. Carl has done quite a few different videos, and also, so we're going to record some of this. If anyone doesn't want to be recorded, we're just suggesting that you raise your hand, and he will make sure that you're edited out, that you're excluded, that we want to make sure that we respect anybody in that sense. So I guess raise hands at this point if there's anybody that's concerned with that. So. He's promised me he's not Mike Wallace, too. There's no intent to ambush or anything like that. It's really just to kind of capture the discussion on this important issue. So, Leah, if you want to start some chat.
I'd like to thank Ann and Steve for inviting me here. I'd like to let everybody know I'm not an expert on fracking or any of this. I'm just a concerned citizen that when I first saw Gasland about a year ago, I realized I hadn't really heard much about what was going on here in Michigan as far as drilling. I knew they had been doing it for some time. So I started looking online to find out more about it. And what I found was not just the fracking itself. There's so many other things that are connected with fracking. But before I get started on that, I would like to invite everyone to the Sierra Club meeting on April 7th. There's going to be a lady from Tip of the Mitt Watershed Council, that's up around Bay City, who's going to be doing a presentation on fracking in northern Michigan. It is open to the public, so I'd like everybody, if you can make it. There's flyers on the table there. If you need some more, we can always print up more for you. That'll be at April 7th at 6:30 to 9 p.m. And the address is on the paper here. It's in Troy. They recently got a new building to use. Okay.
I don't think your mic is not doing much.
Is this supposed to? Okay, this is just for the video. I'll try and talk loud enough. If you can't hear me in the back, let me know, please. I'd like to just read a couple things here that was printed off by the Michigan legislature on oil and gas here in Michigan. The management for oil and gas, the Michigan's policy is to conserve oil and gas through proper drilling and production and by preventing waste. Before a person can drill an oil or gas well in Michigan, he or she must own or lease the subsurface oil and the gas mineral rights. State-owned minerals are leased from the DNR Real Estate Division. Additionally, he or she must obtain a drilling permit from the DEQ's Geologic Survey Division. Before the DEQ can issue the permit, the driller must file a bond with the state to ensure proper closure of the well if the well is abandoned or improperly plugged. The bond amount varies depending on the depth of the well. When a well is no longer used for oil or gas production, state law requires that it be plugged within 1 year. Improperly plugged or unplugged abandoned wells cause environmental problems, including damage to groundwater and drinking water sources. Environmental contaminants concerns led the legislature to establish the Orphan Well Fund in 1994. The fund receives a minimum of $1 million each year from taxes collected on oil and gas production. Money in the fund may be used for plugging abandoned or improperly closed oil or gas wells and conducting cleanup activities and site restoration at oil and gas wells where the owner is unknown or financially insolvent. The abandoned wells are plugged based on a priority list developed by the DEQ. Land rights can be divided into surface rights and mineral rights. Surface property owners do not always own the rights to the minerals below their land, nor are they always aware that another party may own or acquire the rights to minerals below their property. A mineral rights owner can be a private citizen, corporation, or the state, and the owner must lease the rights for development. Conflicts often arise when mineral development is proposed and different parties own the surface and mineral rights. The state does not intervene to settle these disputes. Rather, the parties must settle them privately. While each party has rights that are protected under the law, mineral owners cannot be prevented from accessing their minerals if the state's oil and gas drilling requirements are met. Thus, the inability of the private parties to settle a dispute is not a reason for the state to deny a drilling permit. Michigan acquires much of its rights on surface property and minerals when the land reverts to the state through a citizen's or a company's failure to pay property taxes. The state currently holds 5.9 million acres of mineral rights, 2.1 million acres of which are severed from the surface rights. Until recently, the state had a policy of stripping the mineral rights from the other rights in real property when it acquired land. Thus, the state could sell the surface rights and retain the mineral rights for leasing at a later date. However, conflicts often develop because the DNR can lease the mineral rights without consulting the surface property owner. This conflict was addressed by the legislature in 1998 when it enacted a law requiring the DNR to offer state-held severed oil and gas mineral rights back to the surface property owner for the fair market prices under certain circumstances. Severed oil and gas mineral rights that are transferred back to the surface property owner are subject to a deed restriction that prevents the future severance of the mineral rights from the surface property rights. Should a landowner sever the mineral rights from the surface rights in the property which have been the subject of mineral rights reunification, the subsurface oil and gas rights would revert to the state. And they can also lease bottomlands. The DNR's Real Estate Division occasionally issues leases for minerals located beneath the bottomlands of the Great Lakes. Bottomlands are the land areas that lie below the ordinary high water mark and may or may not be covered with water. The state owns all the bottomlands located within Michigan's boundaries. Michigan has leased the Great Lakes bottomlands since 1945. To date, the DNR has issued 70 non-development oil and gas leases for bottomlands minerals. 30 leases are currently active. Permits to drill below the Great Lakes bottomlands were obtained from the DEQ. A total of 13 wells have been drilled below the bottomlands. Of this total, 8 wells have produced oil or gas. Currently, 7 bottomland wells are producing. 6 are gas wells and 1 is an oil well. All oil or gas reserves below the Great Lakes bottomlands are tapped using directional or slant drilling because the state prohibits drilling rigs or platforms to be physically located on the Great Lakes. A lot of people aren't aware of the fact that they may own property, but they only own what is on the surface. They don't own anything underneath that. So if an oil or gas company comes to your house and says, you know, we want to get access rights, we want to lease the access rights to your property, if they give you a contract, look over that contract closely because a lot of times there's what they call a non-disclaimer clause in there, and there's a whole stack of paper that you usually get. And if you sign that, if they do contaminate your water and your ground is contaminated, you can't come back and sue them because they're going to say, well, we didn't do it. You can't prove it. That's their main thing right there. You cannot prove that their activities caused the problem. And another problem that is occurring with that too is because with the the companies coming in, some people are trying to change the law on this. They only have to give you anywhere from 3 to 5 days notice that they're going to come in and drill, start accessing on that well site. So you might wake up one morning, there's a whole bunch of trucks and things are out there plowing everything up, drilling everything, putting in roads. You can't do anything about it. You can go out and talk to them, but you're probably not going to get anywhere. Another thing, I did leave a list of possible side effects of natural gas drilling. There's some on the table there. I just want to briefly go over this real quickly. If anyone has any questions, please feel free to let me know. Each natural gas well needs at least 5 to 7 acres of land for each well pad. More land is needed for access roads and easements. The traffic increases due to multiple construction trucks, tanker trucks, supply trucks, workers, etc. Increased air pollution due to diesel exhaust and other fumes. Increased noise pollution due to working 24 hours a day for at least 3 to 4 weeks, possibly longer, for each well setup and production startup. Light pollution is due to use of huge light banks for well site / work production at night. This goes on 24 hours a day. Increased disruption of area wildlife and habitats due to noise and lights. Increased number of roadkills due to high traffic volume. Possible disruption to nearby local water sources. Each well fracking requires hundreds of thousands to millions of gallons of fresh water. Water will be taken from close sources if there is sufficient amounts. Otherwise, it will be brought in by tankers from elsewhere. Visual disruption. Oil and gas industry says wells can be placed 1 mile apart and raised berms are being added to lessen the visual impact. The truth is, berms are being added to help contain hazardous fluids materials in the event of an accidental spill. If a thick, non-permeable membrane is not used on the berm, fluid will leach into the surrounding ground and water, causing contamination. Temporary jobs. Many well jobs are either site-specific or seasonal. Health hazards. Many times temporary workers are not properly trained, informed in the use type of chemicals they may come in contact with, which possesses a serious health risk, not only for the workers, but residents, livestock, crops, wildlife, groundwater contamination, the environment as a whole. Drop in home property values, and a possible increase in house repair cost due to damages from repeated frackings. Increase in seismic activity due to repeated frackings. Seismic effects can continue for weeks to months after the fracking has stopped. Each frack causes a ripple effect, and it can travel anywhere up to 40 miles from the frack site. And depending on the type of rock surface that's under the ground, it can just keep, almost like a ripple on the water, it can just keep going until it hits something too hard, and it'll come back again. It's the same thing that's happening in Japan with all their aftershocks, and with the tsunami, it went out and then came back again. It's done that numerous times. It's the same principle with the effects of the fracking. It's sending vibrations through the rock, and it causes increased fracturing, not only where they intended it for, but also further along the rock face, depending on what type of rock is in there. Another possible problem is potential for possible accidents during off-site transfers of toxic contaminated waste, water, fluids, and tanker trucks. I haven't heard of this happening yet, but you can imagine what would happen if one of these big tanker trucks had a car accident, plowed into somebody with all this toxic fluid, and it goes who knows where. So that's, it could run into a residential area. The health hazards just from that alone would be horrendous. Another thing that I'd like to go over too, some people aren't really aware of how the natural gas and oil is formed. I just want to give a brief little mention of that. Oil and gas formation in Michigan started during the Paleozoic period, when much of the planet was covered with shallow seas. Early marine and plant life fell to the seafloor in calm waters. The sediment became compressed, and without any wave action to bring in oxygen, the water became what they call anaerobic, which means devoid of oxygen. Further compression occurred during following ice ages. The resulting decomposition of the materials caused methane gas, and it was unable to go anywhere. So it was trapped and eventually turned into crude oil and natural gas and methane gases. Finding the oil and gas deposits is not an exact science. The industry does have a technique that they use. It's similar to ground penetrating radar, but it goes deeper than that. They only use it in 1% of their surveys because it's very time consuming and it's extremely costly. But it is effective because it goes down far enough into the ground where they can actually see where the reservoirs are. But because it does take so long, time is money, and they're not going to use that like they should. So what they do is they do well bores. Sometimes they hit the right spot, sometimes they don't. So they just keep putting in a bunch of holes until they get the right spot that they want, which actually to me would be more expensive than if they want the right route and use the equipment they have to find out where the reserves are to start with. Steve had forgot to bring his computer, so we weren't able to put this up on the screen. I do have copies of this on the table. This just gives you a little better idea of how some of the natural gas and oil can form under the ground. And you can see by some of the angles here, if they're up on the ground, up above ground, and they're attempting to drill down into some of these pockets, depending on where the reservoirs are, they might put the drill bore down and just hit maybe just a tip of one of these spots. So that's why they'd have to move it and go someplace else and keep doing that until they find the right spot where they're actually inside of the reservoir. But there's different types here. So if you get a chance, when you get ready to leave, you can pick these up and just look at them. I think it's kind of self-explanatory how these things are formed. I think with that, I'll open it up to any questions.
I'd like to hear some reactions from
Leona, could you mention to everybody where most of the fracking is done in the state of Michigan and exactly what's going on? And also, you initially talked about the straight boring that is used in fracking, but how that has changed from the straight down to the tentacles and what that's doing to the earth. And also, I think when they go back down further, which is their plans, as to what could come up from the core of Mother Earth.
Yeah, most of the drilling was what they call vertical drilling, which is just a straight core bore. Now they're doing the horizontal drilling where they've developed the technology where they can do a curve and then go in farther, and that's where they start to fracking. And when they frack, they use various types of explosives to break up the bedrock, the sedimentary rock, so that it releases the oil and natural gas. And they're not supposed to do this anymore, but I'm sure they still are. They were using diesel fuel as part of the explosive material they were putting in. They would go in so far, frack, go in a little further, frack, so they could do this up to a number of times until they get the rock fractured to the depth and the distance where they need to, where they start actually getting production. And every time when they frack, and like they said in the movie, they can frack up to 18 times per well. Every time they do that, it's sending off an explosive charge underground. And when they do that, that sound wave, pressure wave, has to go someplace. So it's diverted throughout the bedrock and it comes up through the ground. And a lot of people who live near these areas where they're fracking, they're finding out that a lot of their homes are starting to cause problems in their home. Walls are starting to crack. Sometimes windows crack, depending on how close they are to it. Another thing that can cause some seismic activity too is when they are putting the fracking fluids into a well that's already been fracked, but they're doing it further. If they put the fluid in at too high a pressure, it causes the same effect as if they had an explosive charge down there. And that's been happening too with what they call injection wells. That's where they use wells that have been emptied of natural gas or oil. They're essentially an empty well. And they're putting some of this waste fluid material from active wells, they're injecting it into empty wells for storage. And it's been happening out west. California, Nevada, and I think Utah had some problems with this, where they were putting the waste fluid down into these empty wells at a high rate, and it was causing seismic activity. Some of the seismic activity out west is registered as high as 5.6 on the Richter scale. So they're not just little tremors, some of them are quite large. One of the websites that I have listed there on a list is the USGS website, which is the U.S. Geologic Society. You can go on their website, and they have a list of seismic activity all over the world. You can pinpoint it to specific states, countries, and it's been interesting because ever since just before the Japanese earthquake, they had a number of earthquakes in Hawaii, Indonesia, that wasn't even mentioned in the paper, and they were fairly large. They were 6.2 and above. But it didn't gather any news media on that. You may have heard of the Kilauea volcano that started erupting more about 3 days before the Japanese earthquake hit. With some of the techniques that they're using now with the fracking, and especially with deeper drilling now, they're going down deeper, and they've discovered they can use the fracking process, which has generally been used for natural gas. They can also use it for oil now. So they're able to get into oil pockets that before they weren't able to access. So they're using the fracking process in deeper areas. One thing that I found when I was doing some of this research is this is a global concern. It isn't just here in the United States. It's all over. Australia has the same problems we have. They're doing the same techniques over there. The people are encountering the same things: groundwater contamination, health risks. Some of the European countries, they have oil companies going over there, and they're just beginning to do surveys on some of the areas. A lot of the European countries have seen what a mess we've got over here, and they don't want the companies coming into their areas and starting to do a lot of this drilling, fracking, and that. Because, for one thing, it's an older area, there's more people, it's more densely populated, and with all the concerns that they have with the groundwater, and not only that, with the seismic activity, they're very leery about it.
I'd like to leave some time for some of the other folks
Sure,
so I'd like to get some.
Well, she answered his question, which is, one of his questions, which was, where in Michigan are they doing it? I didn't hear her answer that question.
There are areas throughout the whole state, but the biggest part of the natural gas is up around the middle part of the state toward the northern section. I think it's called the Ingham, the Ingham Shale deposit. I have a book on the table over there that shows where some of the oil and gas productions are. Around Clare. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So there are a lot of wells around here already that have been in production. In fact, over in Jackson County, they've just recently, within the last few months, they had a company come in, and they've already planned on where they're going to start doing some test drilling. And because there's a lot of people over in some of those areas, they're going to be going right underneath the subdivisions. They're going to be doing slant drilling under there to see. They don't know for sure if there's any deposits there, but they're going to go look, which means they're going to be slant drilling underneath people's houses. And one lady was so excited when she was approached by the gas company because they weren't going to tear up her front yard. So it's either, do you want them underneath your house or what? You know, it's kind of scary.
Sure.
I know in the film they were interviewing a lot of these families in various places that have been having problems with their water, and I know you're talking about some of the workers being like seasonal workers, and is there any number of workers that are experiencing true health problems? Was there anything that they addressed in the documentary or anything that's been out there that maybe, you know?
There's nothing in the sections of the film that we skipped over, but most of those would not have felt free to speak because they may still be employees of Halliburton or Cabot or whomever.
Yeah, I'm sure a lot of the workers have had to sign a non-disclosure agreement too when they've hired in, so that they can't say
Over the
anything.
course of years, there have been a lot of these problems resolved in the courts, and is it your contention that every one of those people that we saw has some sort of contract with the gas companies? I mean, it seems like it would be a class action lawsuit of some sort that would be a natural thing to give you
Interesting
attention.
observation, sure.
Have you heard of Monsanto?
Yeah,
Yeah.
but I mean, is that not a possibility?
There are some lawyer firms that are beginning to get together with some of the people that are having problems with that. And I haven't really gone into that yet, but I'm sure at some point there are going to be class action suits against some of the companies from the people, because it's big money. And for a lot of people to try and hire a lawyer to go into court and with that, it's a long process and it's very expensive. So I'm sure at some point there will be some sort of class action suits going against most of the gas companies.
Another thing, is there any way that you see, because there are natural needs in this country for energy, is there, I sort of involved in the stock market, and there's a company called Clean Harbors that supposedly is basically a reclamation who comes in and the fracking, they're hired by the gas companies to actually do the work that isn't being done now. I have absolutely no idea whether they're any good or if this is going to solve the problem, but is it just, I mean, is your contention that all natural gas drilling is like never going to be right so that we can actually use it? I'm just asking.
Well, I can't really speak from that aspect because I'm not that familiar with that. I think what a lot of people want to see from most of these companies is that they're responsible. A lot of the drilling that they do, once they drill a well and it's producing, everybody kind of disappears. The well's pretty much by itself. I have a book someplace, I didn't bring it, but there's a timeline that they use. I think the wells only have to be checked something like once every 6 months to see if everything is, number one, working well, to check and see if there's any leakage from anything, to see if there's any deterioration of the cement bore casing that they use. That's been another problem too. It's similar to what happened on the Deepwater Horizon, was because they used cement that was not up to the standards that it should have been, so it started to deteriorate. That's happened in a number of oil and gas wells too. Again, it comes down to money. They want to hurry up, get it in, use inferior workmanship. You know, they're not up to par, and who's going to say anything?
What kind of reparations are there? Say you gave the example about the cement deteriorating. Okay, so the chemicals are going into our land and our environment. What, other than saying, oops, we'll put a Band-Aid on it, what?
Well, the book that I have on the table there, I know, there really isn't any. There are certain safeguards that all the companies have, and I have the book on Michigan regulations of oil and gas drilling. And if there's a problem that is discovered and the company is brought to task for it, it's basically, well, we'll go ahead and take care of it. They patch it up, and okay, you did what you're supposed to do. That's it. They followed the guidelines. Other than that, nothing's done.
I have two questions. What is the status of removing the exemption that was granted to them in 2005?
On
And
the Clean
two,
Water Act.
are there any studies done for actually money saved by the gas companies or drillers by not treating the water correctly and so on and so forth. In other words, it would seem to me that such a huge reserves of gas and the price of oil going up, the cost of environmental correctness would be very small. And what are those numbers? So what is the status of the exemption issue? Anyone know?
Yeah, I'm not sure what,
This movie was made when, like 2009?
Yes.
2009, 2010, yeah. It was in release last summer, a year ago. So. Yes?
You mentioned when you had your map that they're going through Oakwood County. Can you describe where in Oakwood County?
okay, I don't have a list of where all the drilling is going to be. It's pretty much throughout the whole state. There's gas reserves or suspected gas reserves actually within the entire state. Because if you go back to when the formation of the state of Michigan, the entire state was underwater way back in the Paleozoic area. So there's sedimentary rock everywhere, and that's where the majority of your natural gas and oil was formed. There may not be enough in some areas to bother with them drilling. The thing is, they really don't know exactly, like I said before, where these reservoirs are. It's kind of a hit or miss thing. They can do core samples, see what kind of rocks they get in the core sample, and if it looks like there's a lot of sedimentary rock that would lead them to think that there could be a deposit there, then that's where they'll try and drill. But otherwise, it's not an exact science for any of the industry people. Yes?
In addressing this gentleman's question about where the legislation stand right now, I don't know, probably read it about a week ago, but you know, I'm older, so my memory's gone. But anyhow, if you go to like Clean Water Action's website, I'm sure they'll have some information on it. If you go to the Sierra Club website, they'll have some information on it. I know just in the last couple of weeks, there has been a lot of legislation going on with the EPA. The EPA, I said it was backwards, Environmental Protection Agency. In the current, Republicans are trying to reduce the standards, and the rest of the organization, people are trying to prevent that. So, but Clean Water Action, Sierra Club probably can give you some information, but truly, if you guys want to do something, what you need to do is you need to get as many people as you know to see this movie, and then you need to talk to your state level, you know, people, your legislator, your senator, the governor, and then in the federal area, because if we just talk about it among ourselves, we're not going to do much.
And there are lots and lots of links online as well to guide you to making those contacts and signing online petitions, as well as, you know, if you've got the opportunity to do it face-to-face with someone, that's even better, obviously. Ann?
There was a fundraiser for Gary Peters last evening, and my question to Gary directly was, what is the best way for me to communicate with my legislators to get my voice heard? In the online signing petition was at the bottom of the list.
Okay.
And if there's a way for us to all practice and have a quick call, email, whatever, they tally those higher than the group ones that come in.
Okay.
So.
And then the next one is if you write individual ones, your own letter, because what happens,
I agree, yeah.
I'm an
Yeah.
armchair activist, you know, my computer, and I send out emails all the time. And so what they do is, like you said, is they, if like the Sierra Club sends out a letter, they know it's from the Sierra Club and they do tally it. But if you can send an individual letter to your whoever, that hopefully that will make a little more difference. But you should, in my opinion, if you can then follow it up with a phone call. I just sent one about the coal campaign here in Michigan, about building more coal plants in Michigan. And I got a email back from my representative in Michigan, which said nothing. So, I mean, nothing. So, and at the bottom of my letter, I said I want a response with specific details of what you're thinking. So, Friday, I have some free time. I'm going to call there and I'm going to say, hey, I didn't get any information back from you.
please let me know what you really think about this. So it's really about being engaged.
In the blue.
I've been a long-time activist, and I know that, online petitions, I do them too, but they're a waste of your time. And also, even actually, you have to get together. You have to join together. The people in this room should all sign a list and come back, in a month. But in that month, it's not just to, have some treats, but you've got to prepare to join together and work together, because our legislature, how old are we that we know that our government isn't going to protect us from this? It's gotten worse. The companies aren't going to police themselves. So you really, I'm not saying that you don't try to make your legislator fearful of your power, but I want to give you one example of a very young girl. Fred Upton came home in February on that week. He used to be a moderate Republican who believed in global warming, and now he's trying to get the EPA to not have any control over greenhouse gas. That's not going to be one of their areas, as well as they're going to cut it down to about a third of the people working at the EPA. That's the Republicans are just, and I'm not saying that the Democrats will save us. The Republicans are out to destroy us with the corporations. They are the corporations. 50% of the senators from 98 to in 7 years went over to lobbyists when they left the Senate. So we're talking about really corporate control of our country. And those online petitions to your legislatures, everybody knows that if they've done long enough, mean nothing. In Upton's district, 67% of the people want EPA to be stronger and do the work that they need to do. So this young girl, who was 19 years old, the first activity she ever did, and the Michigan coordinator for One Sky said, if we can, try to get the Detroit people there, if we get 10 people there, it'll be good, and 20 people will be great. This young girl, who'd never done this before, got over 100 people there. 100 people there in a freezing cold Saturday at noon in Kalamazoo. Now, I know that there's the hardest people to get are environmental activists. That 70% of people think they're environmentalists, but the ones who will actually do more than get in front of their computer are the hardest ones to get. You can get people for animal rights, for civil rights, anti-war. You can get them out on the street. You can get a bunch of them. We just, six of us went down to see Stavenow's office for climate change. And we knew more than she did. And she worked, not Stabenow, her aide, but she wanted us to come back. She basically begged us to come back. She said, we need to hear from you, because I had some really smart environmentalists with me that knew about fracking and knew the stuff. And you've got to, in some ways your legislative people want pressure from groups, but we're not out there. So if you have children, if you have grandchildren, I don't have grandchildren, I'm very upset with my friends that have grandchildren. In the next 10 years, I just watched a video, what we do in the next 10 years is going to count more than what we do in the next 10,000. This planet is at risk, and we need to get serious about dealing with it, and not, when we see an upsetting movie like this, we have to not just go home and send out some more emails. We have to talk to people. We have to get people active. If that 19-year-old girl, the first time ever in Kalamazoo, she didn't even live in Kalamazoo. She lived halfway out. She wasn't even a student at the college. And she did it with, just contacting people, everybody she knew. She'd already had some. She was a shy girl. But that's what we need. And if we can't do it, if we're too old and tired, then we need to get our children, our nieces, our nephews, our grandchildren, and sit them down and show them this movie and say, you've got to save yourselves. So that's my soapbox. But I would like you, one last sentence, excuse me. I would like you to sign up. If you're willing to do something, come to a meeting, come to something that's organized, I would like your name and email, because there's opportunities here. Sorry.
The Sierra Club has a lobby day every spring and fall. There's one, it's in April, and they need citizens to go up to Lansing and work with them and lobby them. So if you go to the Sierra, Michigan State Sierra Club was.
Some of us have participated, it's a very positive experience.
Yeah, I've done it too. So, yeah.
I think that's probably a good, call to action, and you're welcome to stick around. We'll probably just break into smaller groups and have some more juice. And
One final question. We were talking about the Sierra Club, and we have two members of our committee here that work on environment, myself and Leona. We had been talking about coal. We're talking a lot about fracking. We had a special meeting about a month ago with one of our state senators where One Sky was invited, along with about 4 other organizations, where we sat down and talked to one of our state senators about a multitude of issues that our committee is engaged in, that the Sierra Club is working on, and coal is a very important issue.
My daughter's Tiffany Harttown.
So-
She's leading the campaign.
Oh, yeah.
So I just want you to know that it's very important to talk to your state representatives and state senators, and we are moving forward in trying to get some more meetings with some of our state senators, with the committee and subcommittee in the local Sierra Club. And,
Well, a lot
I
of
think
your
it was
state
very good.
senators and representatives, they do want to hear from their constituents because we're the ones that put them in office. And if you do send them emails, they might not read them personally, but they do have staff that does read them, and they take a note of how many people are contacting them in regards to certain subjects. And a lot of times, they will get back with you, because I've sent a couple emails to a couple different congressmen and that, and I have had replies from them. Might take a while, but they do get back with you. Because they do want to know, and they do care about, maybe not all of them, but a lot of them do care about what the people think, because if they're doing a job that's not quite up to snuff, we can tell them that, and you say, either get back on the program or you're not going to be elected again. So public input is important.
Personal, rather than the ones that are online, you can just click on your own words, even if it's just a sentence or two.
It doesn't
They
have to
do.
be a big, long letter,
Yeah.
just a little note or something.
I would just like to say that many of us sitting in this room ought to consider running for a public office. Because it's, we as us, and that's, and I know as distasteful as that might come to many of us, the realization is, it can't just, I've been on the outside, working very actively to put pressure on people in elected positions for a long time, but there are very few Gary Peters out there. We need more of us to step forward.
thank you for coming. Like I said, we've got films coming up the next couple of months.